So how has life been for you now being an inactive politician for the first time in almost 3 decades, right? Coupled with the lockdown because of the COVID-19.
So I was in lockdown even before COVID-19.
So how has your life been in the past few months?
Much more relaxing, obviously, but still remains a concerned citizen, looking around both what's happening in the country and also in the world.
So mostly working from home, stay at home?
Yes, mostly staying at home, following government policy.
Yeah, and enjoying having more time with the cats?
Well, I'm just, to tell the truth, the last year has been good in that, for the first time in about 30 years, where I really have time for myself, more time for my family, certainly, and no weight of responsibility on my shoulders.
Yes, and you have big fans on your page of cats.
Well, they're probably fans of cats, not my fans.
Being known more as a cat man than being a politician now, right?
It's forced upon me because they 30 actually.
30?
It's 30, yeah. They all belong to my daughter.
Yes.
So we live in the same house, so I have to look after them too.
Yeah, and your favorite one, Moji and Muji.
Yes, Moji and Muji.
Is it easier, more difficult looking after cats than looking after politicians? Once under your camp.
Well, I was asked the other day how they managed to stay together, 30 of them, and my reply was, well, looks like they're more orderly than politicians.
Yeah. So how do you keep yourself updated with Democrat Party then?
Well, I follow the news in general, but obviously people who know me, and obviously people within the party, still contact me.
Yes.
Phone calls, conversations every now and then.
You were at the dinner last night, right? At the tea house.
Tuesday night. Yes.
Tuesday, right? So how was it? How was the atmosphere? It was held amid rumors of infighting within the party.
Well, the party leader says that he wants to try to do this on a regular basis. Okay. I'm not sure. I mean, at least it shows that people are willing to come. Mm-hmm. They want to see unity. But if there are problems to be ironed out, they will have to get to grips with that. One meal is not going to make all those problems go away.
Yeah, but Kun Jurin said from now on you should be meeting like once a month.
But even so, because you don't discuss all the issues there, but it might provide some kind of warmth, and people might be more willing to talk to each other more. But I think there are genuine differences in views, which is quite normal for political parties, especially the Democrat Party, where most of us are fairly independent-minded and liberals by nature.
So you don't see these ripples as being a sign of a possible, a blow-up of infighting within the party?
I wouldn't know because I don't have a position in the party. I rarely go in now, so I don't know the facts. But I can sense that there are some people who wish to see some changes. They're a bit frustrated that perhaps the party is not heading in a clear direction like they want to see. So they want to make their views known. So it's up to the executive committee and the party leader to try to address those issues.
So in situation like this, are you glad to be out, or you think you're missing out something?
Well, me being out is not really related to this kind of issue. It's a question of political stance. I committed myself to saying that I wouldn't support the current Prime Minister. Since the party has decided to join the coalition now, it's best for me to stay out.
And any chance of you revising your decision to be leader of Democrat Party again?
Certainly at this particular moment, I don't think the party would be in a position to review its stance on being part of the government. And I don't think the public wants to see political maneuverings at this particular time. I think they, whether they like the government or not, they'd rather see a politics that gets on with taking the country through this crisis. So I don't think there's any question of the party reviewing its stance on this issue, and therefore there's absolutely no reason why I would come back.
But you can only wish the party the best of luck.
Well, I hope I can do a bit more by talking to people and trying to offer my advice or views.
Yeah. So you must have got more free time as an outsider to see how Prayut government has handled the situation of COVID-19, and especially last week when he mentioned new normal approach. What's your take?
Well, that's two separate and very big questions. I think the handling of the crisis, I think there was a pivotal moment when the Prime Minister decided to basically hand over to the decision making almost to the technicians, the leading medical experts. And I think they've played a very important role. And also due to both the strength of our health system, which is not just doctors and nurses, but also the health volunteers that we have up and down the country, all working very hard. And to the surprise, I think, even of ourselves, we, the people, have been fairly disciplined in cooperating with government policy. So we've come through what we might say is the first phase with some success. But the issue of the handling of the economic impact is a different matter. My own view is that the government has made things far too complicated and therefore took too much time in helping people. It would have been, after all, in the end, they're going to be helping, 20, 30, 40 million people anyway. If they had started off like many, including myself, had suggested, which is that they should be aiming at some kind of almost universal scheme, and then just looking at who should be the exceptions, and do that quickly without placing the burden on the people receiving the help, I think we would have had a quicker and a bigger impact on sustaining the economy, and we wouldn't have all these complaints about all the glitches and so on. We've already lost one minister.
That's right.
Well, not yet, but about to lose at least one minister because of this.
Okay. I believe that as you are watching how the pandemic is wreaking havoc on the country and how the government has been handling the situation, at some point you must be asking yourself, how would I handle this situation if it happened during my watch, right? So how would you have done differently besides the
I think on the health side,
yeah.
The approach is almost the same everywhere, but the ability to manage and to put in various schemes will depend on the efficiency of the people who are doing the work. There was one moment when I thought that we might have made a mistake. That was when they decided to close restaurants and places in Bangkok without yet putting in place a scheme to assure people that they would be compensated. And everybody went up back home to the provinces. I thought that was one moment where they might have made a mistake. But for a number of reasons, including the work of the health volunteers in the rural areas, that has been, we escaped that, I think, rather narrowly. But on the whole, the approach is right. On the economy, I mentioned already, I would have probably done the compensation differently. And one thing I think we're still lacking, if there's been management of the situation, we haven't seen much in terms of leadership. I say that because I'm sure it's not just me, but so many people are still wondering, what is the strategy? We're not really told the kind of scenarios that we would be facing and how the government wants to handle things. Everything has been somewhat reactive, although quite efficient in reacting to the problems, but very few very few things in terms of forward-looking and particularly communicating to people. So even the recent speech on
Yes.
on the new normal, I would guess that majority of people still don't know what that is going to entail. And what the Prime Minister said was new normal was pretty much a standard good governance set of good governance principles, but it has to be backed up by action. And the other thing that I think I would have done differently right from the start, which I suggested many months ago, was that this was actually a good opportunity for the Prime Minister and the government to show that they want to reach out to the opposition, people who disagree or do not like the government. We haven't seen much of that happening, and despite now the Prime Minister calling for cooperation and unity, there is no, you cannot demand cooperation from people who think different from you. You have to reach out to them.
Okay. But wasn't his address last week enough to show that he is willing to shake hands with whoever?
Well, when a few months ago, I suggested that, why doesn't the Prime Minister invite the opposition leader or party leaders, say, to Government House and, discuss the situation, ask for cooperation before the executive decrees went to Parliament? You're not going to get them to agree on everything. But I think it would have been a very powerful signal that this was truly a new normal.
And you would have done that?
I think so, yes, I would have done that.
Can he do it now?
Well, it's not too late, but it's more difficult now. I think certainly if it was done a couple of months ago, I can't see the opposition saying, no, we won't go. Today, I'm not so sure.
And what about the decision to extend state of emergency?
I think that this needs a bit of explanation. There are two things that the decree does. One is you're taking power away from the ministers to basically the permanent secretaries, and then reporting directly to the Prime Minister. Now, I think if the Prime Minister is on top of the coalition, you don't need the decree for that. You can now, I think, in a situation which is now certainly the health situation is largely resolved as far as internal cases are concerned. That might not be necessary. The second thing are the legal powers. Now, if it's necessary, say for instance, if you still need to force people into state quarantines, and you don't have a law that allows you to do that, except for maybe by declaring a state of emergency, then say so, and say also that you would not use other powers. Then I think that would address the people who are opposing the extension of the decree. I haven't heard a clear explanation of why the state of emergency is needed for what. So if they explain that, like before, I think it was necessary because of the curfew. Now I think the curfew is seen as not needed for the current situation.
But how difficult it is for a Prime Minister to decide to impose a state of emergency? You have been through this before.
Right. Well, my take has always been that it has to be used as little as possible. And to prove that, one of the things that I did when I was Prime Minister was, a lot of people complain about the state of emergency. But the people in the 3 southern provinces have been living with this for 14, 15 years, right? When I was Prime Minister, I began this process of trying to lift the state of emergency, which I did in one of the districts in the provinces as a pilot project. So my attitude would be to use it as little as possible and make clear exactly why you are using it.
So overall, you are not quite convinced with Prime Minister initiative of new normal approach. You won't see it can happen.
Well, he's what he's saying, he's asking basically for unity and cooperation, which is fine. And I think we would like to see it. But as I said, he needs to lead that process. You can't just, if Kuntep Chai and I disagree on most things, I can't just say, well, let's be united and expect Kuntep Chai to follow me or to agree with me. I need to go and say,
That's right.
can you come and can we
We
discuss?
need to sit down and talk.
Can we be open-minded about this? And what are the differences that we might be able to preserve? And what are the differences that we might put aside for the time being? So it needs a bit of active initiation on the part of the Prime Minister. And the second thing, as I said, is that we don't often hear exactly how the government has mapped out its strategy for the future. And all of this is not being helped by what's happening within the coalition parties, including the Palang Pracharat, where daily news of political maneuverings and possible conflicts and the replacement perhaps of some of the ministers. So this is one clear issue where I think it would be helpful if the Prime Minister would be open about it. So for instance, if he has decided that no, there's not going to be a reshuffle, that Kun Somkit or the economic team can get on the say so. Or if he is thinking of a reshuffle, well then just do it and get it done so we can move on to the substance of what needs to be done in terms of policy.
No, he did say that there will be a cabinet reshuffle, but not now. But it doesn't really explain things, right?
Well, that's exactly what I think you don't need. You either say you're not going to do it,
how do you do it?
or if you do it as quickly as possible. The last thing you want is a period of uncertainty where, with all the money that's going to be spent from the executive decrees, now, awaiting who is going to come and manage that.
Do you think General Prayut is still the same General Prayut that he has always been? And you see any changes in his style of leadership?
No, I think he has evolved through the last 5-6 years, and it will be difficult to know what you mean by the old or the new, because there's been an evolution.
Okay.
Where obviously he has to transform himself from a leader from a coup to somebody who's now heading a coalition with political parties.
No, but that doesn't in any way change your stand on his legitimacy.
Well, I think I've been clear about my stance.
Okay.
And some of the things that were the reasons why I made my stance, I think remains valid. And what I've said about people around him with questionable background and so on, I'd like to see him lead by example. When he says that he wants people to respect the law, to practice good governance, I think he needs to do more. During my time, a minister who has been accused of, I think, far lesser crimes than some of the people in the cabinet now, they resigned, and actually subsequently they were investigated and found to be innocent. But that's the kind of standard that I'd like to see when you talk about, political reform, new normal, even if you want to use that terminology.
But he hasn't taken that chance. It's a pity that he didn't really move to.
Well, to be fair to him, I think he's still grappling with the old style politics, which unfortunately the Constitution has helped foster, and that's going to be with us for quite some time, because the way the rules are written, with the Senate being able to pick a prime minister, a lot of politicians decided all they want to do now is to make sure they have a group of 8 to 9 or 10 friends and demand a position in government.
In terms of economic outlook, it's quite gloomy for Thailand, probably -8%, and that's forecast by IMF as well. So what do you think would be the way out for Thailand?
Well, it's not just us,
But
but
we are
obviously,
the worst.
well, we were underperforming even before COVID-19. I think we were growing probably slowest in the region. So that's one thing that needs to be kept in mind. The second thing, obviously, is that we do depend a lot on income, especially from the tourism sector. That makes up almost, a fifth of our national income. And that is, almost disappear in the whole year. So yes, there has to be a strategy of how, number one, you sustain the income of people, and number two, what's going to replace while that is absent. And you have to admit that we are operating under great uncertainty because we do not yet know when this will end. There's so much talk about the vaccines as being the end point. I think people forget, number one, there is still uncertainty whether it can be, that we will get one. And number two, even if, technically we've got one, how are you going to allocate, distribute, and what will be the price of the vaccines?
Yeah.
And you will need 60% of the population, global population, to make sure that they're. So people haven't really thought through about practicalities of this. So there is a great deal of uncertainty that lies ahead, which means that any kind of strategy needs to be flexible, and which is why I think it would be nice if the Prime Minister would or the government would communicate to people that we would try to do this, but if this happens, we will then have plan B. If this doesn't happen, we can go ahead. And I think that would allow people to plan. Like the way they are opening up in the last month or month and a half, there were a lot of private sector operators who were not ready because they did not know exactly when things would open up. And once the law allows them, but they've taken some decisions concerning their employees and so on, they're not able to take advantage of that. So I think if there is more forward thinking and communications about what the government plans to do, I think it would really help.
But in order to revive
And the other thing, of course, is I have to say is that, and this is not just a criticism of the Thai government, but basically international and multilateral cooperation has been sadly lacking. Take the health issue. I think the WHO has not been able to play any kind of role that would allow the world to confront this together, despite declaring it a global pandemic. Just imagine if there was a coordinated effort for lockdown. We wouldn't have the situation where the disease moves its epicenter from Asia to Europe to North America and now to South America. And then it's going around in a circle. Because,
it was very confusing in the beginning.
But if you are saying this is a global pandemic, you should be at least trying to craft some kind of global response.
It's quite clear that it's the absence of global
Exactly,
leadership.
and this is now coming back to make things difficult. Because, for instance, we talk about travel bubbles. How is that going to be? How is that going to be made concrete? And the situation is so volatile. We talk about possibilities, say, of Australia, but now there's news that there could be a second wave and so on.
Right.
So that is part of the problem, and also in the medium and longer term, I think multilateralism is suffering. It was already there was a shortage of multilateral cooperation even before COVID. But now that has been made really plain by the global pandemic. And it makes globalization much more difficult now because so many countries will try to turn inwards, blaming
Right.
globalization or opening up for the ills. When in fact, if we had a good multilateral
That's right.
response,
Do
this
you
wouldn't be
think-
the case.
Do you think things would have been different had the U.S. have taken that leadership role in this context?
Well, the U.S. is hardly in a position to lead now,
Yeah.
and well, this is unfortunate because I think the U.S. president has even before the pandemic decided that rather than championing all the global principles and rules that bind us together, he's always said that he's not going to be interested in that. And so now that makes it difficult for America to lead. At the same time, obviously now China has emerged as a power that can exploit this weakness in the
That's true. Yeah, that's
in
one
the
biggest challenges that are waiting us. I mean, the re-emerging of China.
right. And how would the U.S. Try to enforce some of the principles that I think it used to stand for
That's
when it's pretty much lost the moral high ground.
Okay.
Do
So
you
let's see
think-
what will happen in November election then.
It because President Trump his presidency because of COVID-19.
Well, no, it's just even before that.
Yeah.
And I say that to my American friends, that if you have somebody who used to be seen as a leader of the free world, suddenly say, well, all the rules that you have been saying to the rest of the world that we should follow, you're not going to follow yourself. Whether it's on trade, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on whatever, then how do you expect to continue to lead?
So it's quite ironic for the U.S. president at this very juncture.
Well, even before COVID, a lot of countries see the Chinese president talking about, supporting multilateral
Right.
arrangements and free trade, whereas the U.S. president is saying the opposite.
So back to Thai politics, Abhisit. How do you see this growing political activism? Yesterday, for example, there were pockets of demonstrations around the country.
Well, I wouldn't call it growing activism. You have to remember before COVID-19, the political situation then, number one, we just had the no confidence motion. And there was a lot of expectation that something needed to change, at least to address some of the issues raised by that debate. Number two, there was conflict around the dissolution of the Future Forward Party, where the new generation, rightly or wrongly, feels that they've been disenfranchised. Number three, the issue of the Constitution itself, where part of the conditions that the Democrat joined the coalition was that there would be a serious attempt to amend the Constitution. So, I mean, these were all there. The COVID-19 came, sort of put that to rest for a while. But now, as the situation sort of dies down, I mean, all these issues are coming back. And
A resumption of what was happening before.
so that's why I'm not saying it's growing. It's,
Okay.
I think
Continuation.
It's a continuation,
of
and it's
the-
been there, and it will probably grow if it's not addressed properly.
And so how do you see these demands made by these, especially the students? We have been seeing this kind of activism for years.
This is exactly why I said that had the Prime Minister reached out when dealing with issues like the pandemic, which is easier to get agreement, it would then set things up nicely for him to seek dialogue on these more sensitive and difficult issues. But at the moment, I still don't see how the two sides are coming together to be open about this. And, each side might feel that, well, they will win. Or they might feel that politically it's convenient to, still feed on the what I call the politics of fear and hatred of the other side. But as time goes on, that's going to serve nobody. And certainly not the country.